Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Late yesterday, 20th Century Fox put a bunch of release dates up on the board, which are not only exciting in the movies that are now officially confirmed, or at least pretty much so. We know that these release dates can change all the time, sometimes totally disappear, but also they're interesting in that these release dates also kind of say a little bit about how Fox feels about these respective films, and also just about the evolving distribution schedule in general, or release schedule, I guess you could say. So a couple of really big ones here. Now, the one that got the most attention, especially because Channing Tatum tweeted about it, was the upcoming solo Gambit film. And 2016 is going to be a very big year for the X-Men. That's the year of the Deadpool movie, of course. Then X-Men Apocalypse comes out May 27th, 2016. And now the Gambit solo movie hits theaters October 7th, 2016. And he had tweeted, "How do you say October 7th, 2016 in Cajun?" I really love that Channing Tatum is taking the role so seriously, and then, he really, wants to get that accent right, which of course is such a big part of the Gambit character. Any comic book reader knows how fun it is to read his dialect, as it's always written out that way, and we'll finally get to hear it. It's been done a couple of times in animation, and Taylor Kitsch tried to do his best job in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I think we've never seen a true portrayal of Gambit in a live-action setting. But the other thing I think that's most interesting about this, besides Channing Tatum being really game for the film and promoting it already, I mean that's really important. You saw how important social media is with the relationship with movies in the studio, from that whole little problem with Kevin Hart and the Sony hacking, how Sony got quite upset that he asked for extra money to promote his films via social media. But also that Gambit will come out in October is really interesting indeed. We hardly ever see big movies like that hit theaters in that time of year. Now, we've seen the summer movie slate expanding to the point where you have big movies coming out in March now, maybe even April as well. I mean, Captain America: The Winter Soldier was an April release, of course, one of the biggest performers of the year. And we have a future Wolverine movie dated for March. But perhaps as the holiday season gets a little bit too crowded, you now see these big movies moving out of the November-December range and into October. And I do wonder if a film like this can succeed in an October release date, and what kind of movie it's going to be. I mean, they know what kind of film they're putting together, and they must feel this is something that can stand out at this time of year. When a lot of awards contenders are also hitting theaters. And also horror movies. That's the beginning of the month, but there's usually a horror movie that hits the beginning of October to get out in front of the Halloween crowd. That was Annabelle in 2014, and that did incredibly well. Maybe Fox looked at Annabelle's success in that release date and said, well, why don't we try and do that with a comic book character? And if it's in New Orleans, and it deals with a little bit of the voodoo situation down there, I suspect it'll be the Assassin's Guild versus the Thieves Guild. Gambit, of course, coming from the Thieves Guild. You could come up with an interesting storyline that could play into the Halloween, fall kind of setting. So that's very interesting. Then also Assassin's Creed got a new release date. That was supposed to be a summer 2015 release. It's been pushed to 2016, but look at this. They've put it for the 12/21 date, December 21st, 2016. Now, it couldn't possibly be an awards contender, even though Michael Fassbender is set to star. But to me, what this says is Fox sees this as their Lord of the Rings. And that, of course, is the Lord of the Rings release date, right before Christmas. And it's worked quite well for them, especially this year where they've dominated the box office for 3 weeks in a row since the final Hobbit film, at least the final Hobbit film, debuted. So the Assassin's Creed, that's a video game, so that's like a different type of film, but they feel they can come in here and take this spot. Means they must feel they're making an epic film. I mean, you need a really epic film with amazing production values and grandeur to, I think, be something that people are wanting to see on the holiday season, especially maybe as their Christmas Day or New Year's Day movie. And I think Fox feels that apparently Assassin's Creed might be that holiday pick, which I think is very, very interesting and shows tremendous confidence in the film. So that's good. August is a bit of a maverick date where they try films out and see if they work out. And August was when they originally were planning to release this. So December 21st must mean they feel really good about it. Then also, just a few days later, it's unusual for a studio to have films back-to-back like this, especially as a wide release. but Fox is also releasing The Greatest Showman on Earth, which of course is the Hugh Jackman big musical about, I believe Barnum and Bailey, or a circus, I forget off the top of my head, but a big circus, person who really made circus a huge deal, the circus a big deal. Now, the fact that this is being released on Christmas Day 2016 means that Fox feels that this is their Oscar contender. So they feel that Assassin's Creed and The Greatest Showman on Earth can share basically a release date. They're only days apart because they have different purposes. Assassin's Creed is a Lord of the Rings type big blockbuster film, and I'm sure that while they're hoping that The Greatest Showman on Earth makes money, they feel that that's more of a little family Oscar-oriented pick. It's almost like releasing The Hobbit and Into the Woods, but from the same studio. And we'll see if their instincts are correct on that. It's also fun to think that Wolverine and Magneto, both reaping the benefits of having a good relationship with Fox, right, by getting these two really fantastic projects, will kind of share a release date as well. And they're, I think, arguably, along with Jennifer Lawrence, the biggest stars over at Fox right now, and certainly in the X-Men franchise. Then another really interesting date. Sorry, my throat's kind of dry today. I apologize about that. It's extremely cold in New York City today. Then the other date that's been settled is Fantastic Four 2 for June 2nd, 2017. That is just amazing. They have a lot of confidence, or enough confidence in this, to set a release date for the second film. Now, that might be part of their publicity ploy. And I say ploy because it's a little bit of an underhanded trick, but the studios do it all the time, and we've discussed this before. They announce that they're planning to release a sequel prior to the release of the first film or the next film in the franchise to really show, oh, we believe in this, either you get on this train or not, but it's leaving the station and it has a lot of stops planned, so you want to get on. And so I think that's part of the plan. I think, of course, this film is far enough out that if the Fantastic Four film that's hitting theaters this year crashes and burns, it's an August release, by the way, it's in that Maverick section there. I believe it's taking the Guardians of the Galaxy date, first weekend in August. But if that flops, of course they can scrap this or push it back to rework Fantastic Four yet again. Now, the final date that's been picked is the next Planet of the Apes film, and this is set for July 14th, 2017. And this is being pushed back. Again, this was supposed to be something, I believe, I think it's definitely being pushed back. It was supposed to be 2016 release. I know that because I just filmed the top 10, your top 10 will be going up either later today or tomorrow, and part of what I put in my script for that episode was that the next Apes didn't come out till 2016. So that's coming out in 2017, and one of the reasons might be, as I touch on, as you'll see in the top 10 list, is that the screenwriters and producers of that film, Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, they're involved heavily with Avatar, which is coming out in 2016. Although we don't know the succession of the Avatar sequels. They might be coming out every year because they've been working so long to plan them. They could be working in that regard, where they're just going to hit really fast in consecutive years. But Apes obviously needs more time, and perhaps it needs more time because Serkis is so busy right now. He's really into Marvel. He's making his directorial debut, where he's also going to play a role, and so that's very interesting as well. So what do you think of those release dates from Fox? Fox had a fantastic 2014, and it looks like they have a couple of fantastic years ahead of them as well. This is a studio that for some time was a little bit on the outs with the fanboy community because they'd taken so many properties from Marvel, fairly, but a lot of people really resented that they had the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four when they would like to see those, and Deadpool, and they'd like to see those properties over the House of Ideas in Marvel's own in-house studio. But I think that Fox is getting back on track, certainly with X-Men. They've had really wonderful films this year, and maybe they'll start to become a studio that audiences have a little more faith in. And I'm curious if maybe you're starting to feel a little bit more friendly and positive towards Fox as a result of moves like this. All right, so that's the first story of the day. It ended up being first because it was the latest breaking news. But another story that really made a lot of headlines yesterday, it was trending on Twitter for almost the entire day, is that the Ghost in the Shell movie is moving forward at a considerable rate. Now, it's not greenlit yet, but what happened yesterday is that Scarlett Johansson, who'd been dancing around the role, it was between basically her and Margot Robbie. Robbie, of course, took the Harley Quinn role, which I think no one would hold against her. I think that was the smartest move. But that really left it open for Scarlett Johansson to be made a firm offer for the Ghost in the Shell lead role, and she took it. And her being attached to the film, many are speculating will be what finally allows it to be greenlit. I think it has two problems with her being, one with her being cast and also the film in general, which I think would give me some pause. before, if I were a studio, before I decided to greenlight this movie. But I think this is a very smart move for Scarlett Johansson, despite some of the drawbacks potentially associated with this project, which I'll get to in a moment. But the reason I think it's such a good idea for Scarlett Johansson is that she had, talk about an amazing 2014, she had a phenomenal 2014. She had a career redefining year. And she's basically found a property here with Ghost in the Shell that takes all of the films that really made a big splash for her in 2014 and puts them into one single project, which could, I think, have tremendous results. So what were the big hits for her in 2014? Well, she did an absolutely fantastic job with Lucy and Under the Skin. These were two very small, risky movies. I think that nobody knew quite how they were going to perform at the box office, and with Under the Skin, she got a ton of critical acclaim, not just from critics, but fans. Fans were very impressed with what they saw that she did there. Also, she showed a willingness to experiment, and also, not just with, themes and styles of filmmaking, but, it's a very experimental film, but also, that was a film where she was fully nude, which factors in quite strongly with the Ghost in the Shell role. So she showed that for the right project, she was willing to go there, and that she could go there without it being sensationalized. Oftentimes, when actresses do full-on nudity, it becomes that's all anyone sees about the film, and it's tough to do this. I think a lot of guys saw Under the Skin. I'd be curious to know, any women, did you go and see that? Somebody asked me if I saw Under the Skin, and I said, I don't want to see naked ScarJo dip guys in black goo, and that was kind of just something I was like, this film isn't for me, but I'm curious about Ghost in the Shell. I don't know how they're going to handle the nudity situation there. Nudity is really difficult, and I still believe to this day that the full frontal nudity in Watchmen really derailed that project. Because sometimes, audiences, you never know what they're going to focus on, and because if you don't give them enough of a quality story to focus on, as in Watchmen, which is weird considering Watchmen is a graphic novel, is one of the highest quality stories ever. But if you have a film that's not quite clicking in the narrative department, they just get distracted by a blue penis, and that's how that movie became known. It was the blue penis movie. But now, I think Scarlett Johansson showed that she can do it tastefully, and she also has set a track record for doing nudity in a role where people take it seriously and it doesn't overshadow the project. So there's Under the Skin. And then Lucy, of course, is a really out there sci-fi film. Now that was one of her biggest hits of the year. And of course, Captain America, I'll get to that in a moment, but with Lucy, she proved that she could carry a movie. Lucy, it did over 100 million, about 120 million here in the United States, but worldwide, this is a film that made, let's see, I wrote it down here, 458 million. That's almost $500 million. And that's off of just basically Scarlett Johansson alone. That's incredibly impressive. And I think one of the reasons she got the offer for Ghost in the Shell, that she could carry this movie. And then, of course, she co-starred, or really had a large supporting role in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I loved her in that movie. A lot of people wanted to see her get a Black Widow movie out of that. But, of course, when they announced their next slate of films for Marvel Phase 3, a Black Widow movie was nowhere to be found. Now, of course, I'm sure she'll be factored in heavily into the other films, but maybe she won't be available. And maybe this is Scarlett Johansson's way of saying, hey, Kevin Feige, if you're not going to take my contributions to the Marvel Cinematic Universe seriously and honor them and give me, my due reward for doing such a fantastic job with this character, I'm going to go where others appreciate me and I can get a lead role. So I'm sure Kevin Feige is watching this very closely, and I'm wondering what it's going to do to her availability for Marvel films. She's not going to totally shoot herself in the foot, but I see a little bit of a power struggle developing. So I think she's a fantastic choice for Ghost in the Shell on paper. We'll see how the fandom reacts to the fact that this is anime and this is an Asian character. Now that's really one of the big potential pitfalls here, and that's the considerable whitewashing of the role. And especially because this is such a popular anime in the Asian region, and don't forget the Asian box office is huge right now, with China leading the way, followed by Japan and South Korea, who put big numbers up as well. Frozen made a ton of money from this region. You can really get a lot of money from not just China, but all three of those big Asian countries in terms of box office numbers. And we'll get to box office, by the way, with the viewer question today. But to whitewash such a significant role for this group of people, this culture, this pop culture section, I think is potentially a problem. And we'll see. This will be a really big litmus test, just as Exodus was in terms of whitewashing religious films. How do people feel about whitewashing strong properties from other parts of the world? Edge of Tomorrow came out on the other side okay. Also a very popular manga anime title that was whitewashed, and it did very well at the box office. It wasn't one of the top 10 grossing films of the year, but I believe it made it into the top 20. So that's pretty darn good, and I think that, you might attribute that to Tom Cruise having a little bit of a hurdle still at the box office, so he's not quite posting numbers like he used to. And maybe Emily Blunt, to some degree, is still a tiny bit of box office poison, at least maybe a box office Achilles heel. We'll see. She's got to nip that in the bud if she wants to level up to potentially a Marvel movie. Although some of you say she's tweeted she's not Captain Marvel, but maybe I'm hoping it's a misdirect. But anyway, back to Scarlett Johansson. So that could potentially, backfire for her. I'm sure that Christian Bale and Joel Edgerton never imagined that they would be stuck in the horrible perfect storm of whitewashing with Exodus when they accepted those roles in that film for working with Ridley Scott. I'm sure they imagined it going in quite a different direction. Now, the other problem with the Ghost in the Shell movie is that it's directed, or set to be directed, by Rupert Sanders, who did Snow White and the Huntsman. Now, that was an okay box office performer, more than okay. It was very, very solid. But at the same time, it was a really bad movie, particularly because of Kristen Stewart. Now, you can say it's Kristen Stewart's own fault. She's not a great actress. Scarlett Johansson does a much better job, and she'll come out on the other end looking great, just like Charlize Theron did. But, a bad director is hard to overcome, and, you're really rolling the dice, and maybe she won't be so fortunate, especially since she'll have Rupert Sanders' undivided attention. So I don't know how on earth he got another project after Snow White and the Huntsman. I guess they didn't watch the film, but, I also don't think that he has tremendous success or even experience with these kind of, futuristic special effects that he'll be called upon to do in this film. So I'm a little nervous about who's in charge behind the camera for Ghost in the Shell. But it's a very interesting concept. I've touched on this before when Scarlett Johansson was first mentioned to be up for the role. Basically, it takes place in the far future where this detective, played by Scarlett Johansson, was a human at one point in her life, but then a horrible accident needed her consciousness to be downloaded into a cyborg. So she's a human brain in a robot, or human thought patterns programmed into a robot body. She's also a model, which is very common, and being used for other parts of the world. It's like a product line, and that allows her to blend in. Nobody thinks she's this famous detective from a police division that investigates cybernetic crimes, but she just seems like she could be anyone's robot for any purpose. So I think that's an interesting idea. I'm sure Scarlett Johansson would love to play with that. A little bit of an Orphan Black kind of scenario, I guess you could say. And then also, because she's in a cyborg body, she's susceptible to being personally hacked. And I think that could be very interesting and plays into Lucy a little bit, and also her working under the skin. So I think it's a really good action role for Scarlett Johansson, which has a lot of, great chances for her to flex her muscles as an actress. So great property for her. If she can avoid this, whitewashing problem, it could really turn out, and also Rupert Sanders, this can turn out to be a really successful property for her. So I'm curious, what do you think of Scarlett Johansson being cast in this role? Do you think it was a good choice for her? And do you think this could blow up a la Exodus in terms of whitewashing? Or do you think we have another Edge of Tomorrow situation? Now, for the third story of the day, talking about diversity, this is a good situation where we kind of have more diversity being brought into Hollywood instead of them doing their best to scrub it out. And that's with Star Wars The Force Awakens. And a big story that popped up yesterday as well, Hollywood hit the ground running with 2015 with our first week back, and that's that several actors from the Raid 2 have been cast in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, that is fantastic news, because these actors do such a phenomenal job. They've done such a great job. I mean, we're still hoping that Gareth Evans, the director of the Raid films, can get something else. He's just right now producing the Hollywood remake, which he's not directing. But it's nice to see at least the actors moving into Hollywood, because I think everybody from the team, both in front of and behind the camera, over on the Raid films, deserves to move forward. Really, 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 really talented group of people. And if you haven't seen the Raid, or especially the Raid 2, I think you're really missing out. You don't need to see one to understand the other, and the Raid 2 is a really not only a good film, but with incredibly high production values. I think that it will be definitely worth your time. And now it's kind of something you definitely want to see if you want to prepare for Star Wars The Force Awakens. I predict a lot of people will see the Raid 2 after they see Star Wars The Force Awakens, if these gentlemen are used appropriately. So who was cast? Now, I'll use their names, but I'm also going to tell you who they are, because we're still familiarizing ourselves with these Thai actors. You have Iko Uwais, who's the lead. He's very, very good. Then Yayan Ruhian, he's the older, long-haired gentleman in the films. He also does a lot of fighting, but he's also the fight choreographer for all of the both Raid films. So he's very, very talented, and I'm glad to see that he not only has been brought on as a fight choreographer, I'm sure, for his sequences, but will be on camera as well. And then also, the other person is Cecep Arif Rahman. And it was only in the Raid 2, but he is the one who was the other half of that big kitchen fight at the end, towards the end of the film. This was an amazing fight. It lasted for a very long time. I think it really played into the stamina that's necessary for a martial arts fight. It was a knife fight. They had brought in other elements to the fight towards the end of it. It was not only was it really well choreographed and really expertly executed, but they did a good job acting as well. You could feel, what was on the line and their exhaustion, and that they were just locked in this almost, violent dance. And it was really, really impressive. And I'm sure J.J. Abrams must have seen this and said, hey, you know what? I want that in my Star Wars film. And I think it's really great that he's watching other films, particularly foreign films, with an eye to what he can maybe take and, not only use to his own advantage, but to elevate just in general in terms of, audience awareness. And a lot of people didn't get to see the Raid 2 because I think, unfortunately, Hollywood still doesn't do a great job distributing foreign films. I mean, they get them in a few theaters, but I don't think they do the best job of getting the word out there that this is something that people should see. But hopefully this will help, and I think Star Wars is a good place for this. I wouldn't be surprised if all three of them. Basically, I think J.J. Abrams, by the way, just wanted that package from that big fight. He was like, I would like a big set piece like this. I want the two actors who perform the fight, and I want the guy who choreographed it. But he should be in the movie too because he's awesome and he works so hard and he was in the Raid and people like him and they know who he is. And I think that's really great. But I think that, Star Wars is a situation where you have lots of different alien races coming together under different scenarios. And so I think this is definitely could be, these guys come from maybe a certain planet or they're a certain, alien race. We'll see how they come out looking after they leave the makeup department. But I think this could be a really interesting situation. It could be maybe also, Boba Fett, I believe that actor, I believe he was Aborigine, I'm not sure, but I think Thailand could maybe play into that. Maybe they're from the same planet as Boba Fett. That could be really cool as well. Maybe they're relatives of him. I think that could be interesting now that I think of it. That's just something that came to me right now, and that would be, who better to play the descendants of Boba Fett than guys from the Raid. That would be amazing. All right, so now on to the viewer question of the day. Now, this is from Ross Peter 123, and he asked this on my top 10 movies of the year video episode about the box office and how they perform both stateside and worldwide. And he had a very interesting question, and he said, Grace, why is there so much emphasis on domestic and foreign box office? Does it really matter where the money comes from so long as the movie makes plenty? That's a really interesting question, Ross, and so I just wanted to kind of explain why movie grosses are reported the way they are. It might change in the future, but I'm just going to explain to you what's going on right now. Now, of course, it does matter what a movie makes overall, and I think at the end of the year you do see those types of headlines. I did a report on the worldwide box office, and when people talk about a movie that made $1 billion, and you can only do that at the worldwide box office, they of course don't attribute that success to any one country. I mean, there are countries that are a factor in that success, which I'll get to in a moment, but, I think that the worldwide box office is becoming a bigger part of the conversation because it's such a game changer for so many movies. However, the reason that box office numbers are reported both domestically and worldwide is because you still have a situation where there's only two big fish, in the pond and in the sea. And the other countries there, as I've noted before, contribute such a small amount of money in contrast that they don't get reported on as much. They need to be grouped together with the other money, with the money from the other countries to really make a difference to a movie's bottom line. Some countries do change that, and there's different levels of other countries. I think Mexico and Russia are very big contributors to a film's bottom line. The UK can contribute a decent amount of money, and then of course, as I mentioned earlier in this very episode, there's the Asian triangle. You've got China, Japan, and South Korea, which can contribute an enormous sum of money, and that's why you're seeing them being reported as a trio. But still, you can't make money anywhere like you can in the United States, which used to be the only place you could do this, but now you can also make a significant amount of money in China, which is why you're seeing more and more, especially in the industry trades, the Chinese box office is being reported, much in the way that it is in the United States, because they can deliver, I mean, as I talked about in my box office review, Transformers 4 made more money in China than it did in the United States, and thanks to that $300 million it picked up in China alone, it joined the $1 billion club and is the most successful movie of the year, all because of China. So that's one reason that these numbers are reported. They're big chunks, and they're the ones that have the biggest effect on a movie's success. So that's why you're seeing them reported that way. Now, the other thing is that a movie's box office is something that's constantly evolving. If we only reported it at the end of the day, maybe we wouldn't divide it up just into domestic and foreign. Maybe we would have more countries in the conversation. But that's not the way it works right now. Right now, box office is a developing story, as I said. So when there are big developments, they're reported on. And these are where the biggest developments are coming from, the United States and now China, and occasionally other places as well. But again, they're usually grouped together because the numbers aren't that impressive until they are grouped. Now, the other reason, well, why are they a developing story? Why don't we just wait to see how a movie does until the end of its run? Well, the reason is because the movie's performance in terms of the box office is a factor in convincing other people to go and see the movie. Look at films like Avatar and Gravity and even Frozen. Those films were such huge successes at the box office. And let's put Guardians of the Galaxy in there as well. And I'd say even the recent Gone Girl. These are films that performed so incredibly well at the box office that people who were on the fence or maybe even hadn't considered seeing them at all took notice. And that's something that really helps a film. You saw lines for Avatar and Gravity, way after they had hit theaters. Those were two films in particular, I think, because they were films that needed to be seen in theater because of their special effects. And that was and also the box office. People were like, wow, this movie must be really something special, and I need to see it in a theater because it's in 3D. I better go. And that box office reporting is a tool, a publicity tool, to not only get people into the theater, but also to make people think, in Hollywood, say, okay, well, this movie's a big deal. People like this movie. I should pay more attention to this studio, to this writer, to this director, to these actors. So everybody benefits from a big box office number, and that's where the numbers come from. They come from the stateside release, and they come also from Asia. And stateside is usually the first release, so that's why those numbers are getting reported, because they're the biggest numbers and they're coming in first. So it's really a situation of where the money's coming from, a need for publicity, and then also where the movies are released first. And we have less and less day and dates. And United States is usually, that's actually the opposite situation. We're getting more day and date releases. But the United States is still really one of the first places that a movie will open and where it makes that big splash. Until other countries can make a movie that opens it with like 50 to 60 million plus, and so far I believe only China can do that, you're not going to see other countries reported the way you do the United States and China. All right, Ross Peter, I hope that was illuminating. Thank you so much for your question. I thought it was a really good one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow. All right, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.